We're 3 minutes late. We'll catch up, I promise. Welcome to Labor and Health. Mike, would you like to call roll for us this morning?
Senator Bouchard,
Excused?
Senator Furphy, Senator Hutchings,
Excused?
Senator McCune,
Here.
Chairman Baldwin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum, barely, but we have a quorum. Welcome to Labor and Health, everybody that's here and online. Just a quick reminder, this committee likes donuts. If you want to bring us donuts on Wednesday, please leave your cell phone turned on. Just a quick reminder, although most committees I hear is that we try to be the friendly committee and an effective committee at that. And we try to be kind in our questioning and we ask the same of the audience and try to get things worked through and not, we're controversial, don't get me wrong, but we try to keep it on an even keel in here. So this morning, we're going to start out with Senate File 21, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Accreditation Amendments. I believe Senator Costa is going to present this bill to us. Come on up to the soft chairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Welcome, sir.
Which ones you have here anyway?
The rest will be here.
That's fine. This bill has an amendment that I need to pass out as well. Would you like me to pass that out first or do you want me to hold
Why
on?
don't you go ahead and give that to our secretary there.
Okay.
Go ahead and proceed, Senator Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 21, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Accreditation Amendments. The history of it goes back to 2012. And in 2012, an amendment was put on the budget that the drug courts would certify with one of the three national known companies, and most of them have certified with one called CARF, which is CARF. The amount of money that they've had to spend on that is somewhere between $7,500 and $8,000. What their concern was they really don't see the advantage of the certification there that the state of Wyoming can certify them and has been working on some with certification already. And so they're wanting to try to use that money for other patients so that they can help them. If you're not aware of the drug courts, they work with people, not young people, but all ages of people, trying to help them change their lifestyle and become successful in getting away from drugs and being in the streamline of the production of people. I guess, how are you successful with others? So what the bill does is it just simply says they have the option to either certify or not certify nationally. It's their choice if they choose to. And a number of the drug courts had agreed that they would like to pass that up and try to save that money and use it for other means. If you go through the bill on page 1, it talks about specifying that certain accreditations are not necessary for reimbursement for the substance abuse and mental health services that they provide. I want you to remember the amendment is to guarantee that this is only for drug court programs. It is not for other programs. It's not to weaken anything. It's not to make anything less important. It's to just simply move the certification from the national one that they fill out and really feel like they don't receive the benefits that they would for filling it out to the state who would take care of it. As we go through, you'll notice that on page 2, the lines 12 through 19 talk about the 3 national certifications. You can read them. I'm not going to go through them all. The one that most used is called CARF, CARF, which is accreditation by the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities. We move over to page 3. Again, this is talking about the people that are involved, and that's on line 4. Delete under this, and on line 5, delete article and insert that are provided for or through a program or court under the Court Supervised Treatment Programs Act. And then on line 10, you'll notice it says after under, delete this article and insert the Court Supervised Treatment Programs Act. So this guarantees you that this is only for the drug court program, and that's nothing else. And then on page 4 is when it would be put into effect. And so that's really all there is to it. I'm not trying to simplify it in any way, shape, or form. I'm just trying to help them. They were the ones that brought it up, and I said, well, let's bring it up and let's see if we can save you some money so you might be able to use this for other needs. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Very good questions for Senator Furby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Cost, on page 2, and this is an existing language. It says the department will establish standards. Senator, have they done that you're aware of?
To the best of my knowledge, I'm pretty
Senator
sure that
Cost,
they have.
through the chair, please.
I'm sorry. I am in error, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Furby, to the best of my knowledge, I believe they have. I know that Director Johansen is here, and he certainly could talk about that in more detail than I can, but to the best of my knowledge, yes, they have.
Very good. Further questions, committee. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As someone on this committee that has really tried to move to where we're making sure that we're taking care of people who have addiction problems, I found that there was so much red tape and how we accomplish that. And I also found that there's so many people that have fences up because they're on different sides of licenses and everybody wants a piece of the pie. I'm really concerned with taking this and giving this to a bureaucracy to figure out, because as I've found that we had to roll a lot of that back. And so I'm really concerned about this, moving this over and letting someone else take control of this. I think it's in our hands and right now, and I think that this moves it away from us. So how do we know that this doesn't do that if we don't, the rules and everything they get implemented by an agency? That's concerning.
Senator Cost.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, I think you'll find out that the state of Wyoming is in charge of these drug courts, but they're told that they were to send it to a federal or a national certification of one of these 3. Those 3 they fill out paperwork for, but they really don't feel that they get any benefit from those 3, that the state does a better job of helping them with it than anything that's provided for them nationally. So it's still going to be in our state that we're going to be controlling these drug programs, and not something federally. CARF, the one most of them use, is out of Canada, which is extremely long ways away. And I can't say that they feel like they get the kind of service out of them that they would appreciate getting. So.
Thank you. Further questions? No further questions. Have a seat, stand by. Let's talk. I see Department of Health is anxious to get up here. He always just has that anxious look on his face. Welcome, Director.
Thank you, Chairman Baldwin, members of the committee, Stephen Johansen, Interim Director for the Wyoming Department of Health. I'll keep my comments brief. Senator Koss walked through the bill, no additional comments there. To give you a sense of the impact to the department and how we prepared the fiscal note was somewhat indeterminate. What you'll see on that is, as the bill was written, this would have applied to all of our community mental health and substance abuse programs, including our court supervised treatment. So the scope was a bit broader. And so the fiscal note that you'll see is really the funding that we provide to providers to get or seek one of those national accreditations that was mentioned, whether it's CARF or Joint Commission, that option is there. I'll mention historically to the discussion that Senator Bouchard brought up, probably years or even decades ago when I was likely in short pants, the Department of Health in its mental health substance abuse programs would do far more site visits, on-site compliance, setting those standards that were brought up. And over the years, culminating in about 10 or 15 years ago, the decision was made that to reduce that, that state staff and that sort of compliance work in favor of using a national accreditation, which was becoming a standard for these types of providers as a tool to be more efficient, to ensure that type of standard of care, quality, et cetera. So with the amendment that I know you have in front of you, that would obviously reduce the scope of this just to the drug court, the court supervised treatment programs. To give you a sense of what that would look like, if CARF or one of these accreditations were an option for providers, we would continue with business as usual to the best of our ability to help fund that. But then for the providers that chose not to seek one of those accreditations per the text of the bill, we would need to establish or reestablish those standards, have staff to do those on-site reviews to assess the compliance with those standards. So my point, Mr. Chairman, is that the bill as it was originally written to me took a tool away from the department to allow the providers to seek a national accreditation and then we use as a standard, as opposed to having more of a heavy bureaucracy in the Department of Health to assess that. But I will say, if it's the will of the body and the legislature to make this more of an option and then have the department certifying or doing compliance reviews ourselves for those providers, we will make it work. The fiscal impact of that, again, you have an amendment in front of you, so it's kind of indeterminate with what the scope would be. We would look over the months following the legislative session to either scale up what that administrative effort would look like or set those standards. So I can't tell you exactly what that would cost, if we would contract it out, if we would request part-time or contractor positions. As I understand with the amendment you have, that scope is heavily narrowed. So I doubt there would be a whole lot of providers that would choose not to seek CARF accreditation or another one. But again, it's kind of indeterminate with what our role would look like after that. But we will certainly do our best to make it work either way. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director. And Senator Bouchard, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my concern is we have one accreditation that would be probably $10,000. I just don't see smaller providers being able to jump through that hoop. We kind of hashed this out before with licensing because they were the ones that held that umbrella. And we had, just a fight we had to get NADAC and IC and RC approved. And that, now I see a drug court situation. We have corrections that has to work in this same field. I think we just have too many people wearing the hat that they're saying, hey, we're the ones in charge. So I'm concerned, unless health department's going to take it away from licensing, which I don't see that. So we're going to have different functions from different parts of government, and it's going to be hard to get them all on the same page. And I think the difficulty is we want to make sure we get people who are incarcerated, people who are in the system to get addiction treatment, because it's not just the felony part of the drug part, it needs treatment. If we're not getting them treatment, and then the recidivism is a problem. So unless we're able to tell you who you're going to also allow in this bill, which you guys aren't gonna like that either. So I'm having a problem with the bill all the way around because of those items that I just mentioned.
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, if I may, Senator Bouchard, I think we all want the same thing, which is when we have providers or folks in our communities taking care of folks with mental health or substance abuse needs, whether it's court ordered or not. I think we all want a high standard of care to ensure safety, to ensure high quality. Our position as a department is the most efficient way to do that is to have as narrow of a set of accreditation standards that you can and reduce the amount of compliance work that the state does. We think one of these national accreditations is the best way to do that. And we try to use the funding in court supervised treatment or mental health and substance abuse that we have to offset those costs of accreditation for those providers. So I think we're on the same page there. Again, our concern with this bill is probably narrowed with the amendment you have in front of you, but it's really a question for us of administrative efficiency versus having this wide range of quality standards that folks might be confused of what is our true target that we're shooting at.
Good follow-up, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I mean, I'm the guy that said we needed to let NADAC and ICNRC come be the standards. And we had people that had 10 years experience in corrections, licensed, actually people that went down to the bottom of their life, came back out, crawled out of the ashes, had it in their heart to work with people in corrections. And I was fighting everybody to try to get these people that actually moved to Wyoming to take a position, and licensing wouldn't let them work. So understand, that's why I'm not taking this so light. There's been some serious problems, and now I'm hearing you say we're gonna put it in the scope of one, and that's a problem because now we have people that use the system to say, well, we've got this accreditation, and we're not going to let you use yours, and they fight us in these very committees. We've all been in this committee. I think it's the most adversarial committee when it comes to all these different providers and different licenses. So this is a real concern.
And Mr. Chairman, final comment from me. I think there is a distinction differentiation between the licensure discussion, which you're right, has occurred quite a bit in this committee and others, versus the accreditation for the provider as a whole. But point well taken. Again, we're, as a department, we're not trying to complicate things. We want to simplify things, but at the same time ensure those high standards of care.
Very good. Further questions, committee? Senator Furphy, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, following up on what Senator Bouchard said, seems to me we would like to encourage these mental health professionals to get accredited. I don't see a problem with encouraging them to do that. This bill, which I agree with, is saying you don't have to have the accreditation, but it seems to me we ought to set a high standard for these mental health professionals to attain the highest level of education, et cetera. Do you have comments on that? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, again, would draw a slight distinction between licensure and certification at the individual level, so an individual provider versus a provider as a whole, where we really talk about accreditation and the standards of how they deliver care. So there is a distinction there. But my comment would be, I totally agree that we need to have high standards and high expectations, especially for this type of work where some of the folks that are served are so vulnerable. The way that, again, to reiterate how we envision this would look if the bill were to pass, and if it were to pass as amended with what you have in front of you, is that instead of the department requiring one of these accreditations, it would become an option. And some providers might choose to seek one of those accreditations, which I think as today, we would continue to incentivize through funding, because that's a more efficient way in the big bureaucracy of the Department of Health to bounce off of a standard as opposed to scaling up, in-state staff to do those compliance checks. But for providers that would choose not to seek one of these accreditations, we would, per the bill language, need to develop those standards, which we would likely align to one of these national accreditation bodies, and be able to do that enforcement and compliance and on-site review work ourselves. So it's a little bit, in our estimation, more administratively intensive, but I think it achieves the same result. It just comes at a bit of a cost.
Thank you. Further questions, committee? Thank you very much, Director. Any other departments or agencies which wish to testify? With that, we'll open it to public comment. First in the room. Anyone in the room? Come on up. Welcome to Labor and Health. You know us all well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy Somerville, Executive Director for Wamsack, the Wyoming Association of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Centers. And we just have a few comments on the bill. I have to admit, when it came out, we were pretty concerned. As it is originally written, the community mental health centers are caught up in that. And it would kind of take that CARF piece off the table as a requirement. All of your community mental health centers are CARF accredited, and we all support it strongly. We think it's very, very important to have those accreditations for the community mental health program. My understanding is that Senator Cost amendment will potentially allay that concern, which we strongly appreciate. So I want to make just a couple of additional comments in regards to drug court. One of the concerns that we've had with this bill is just a lot of misinformation going around. And so I thought I'd share a few things with the committee in regards to what CARF actually looks like. So community mental health centers in 6 of the 13 counties that have a drug court program, community mental health centers are running those programs. The rest of them are done either by an internal provider, that somebody that the county agency or somebody has hired, or a private practitioner. So it's a mix of all the providers in Wyoming, which is actually, we think is great, a great way to run the program. The CARF accreditation right now has to be done every 3 years. It costs approximately $7,200 to $7,500, somewhere in that framework. And I believe, as was testified before, that is paid for by the Department of Health right now in those contracts. It does ensure and review clinical practices, business practices, and ensures that your providers are really doing what they need to be doing. We want to really underscore that how important that is. These are a very high risk population with drug court. They're very vulnerable, as was stated before, and it's just makes it even more important that we're making sure that we're maintaining those quality standards. I guess my last comment would be, if we do have a little bit of concern for a community mental health center, we do our community mental health center CARF, and we add, for the centers that do the drug court programs, we add those programs to that CARF certification. We don't want to get into a situation, which I don't think is likely at this point, but possible, where that community mental health center is doing a CARF accreditation for that side of the house, and then doing a separate in-house DOH accreditation, depending on how this rolls out. We want to make sure that that is still an option. And I believe how the bill is worded right now, that would still be an option, but that was one of our only other concerns. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions, Ms. Somerville, committee. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me for being gun shy here, but I mean, we've been through this where your organization was actually on one side of the fence, and we had other providers that couldn't get in. And oddly enough, a lot of your providers didn't even do the work in the same scope of like inside of corrections. I'm really concerned about, we're saying this one standard is it, but yet IC and RCs have been around a long time. I mean, 70s, specifically with drug addiction professionals. As you remember, the fight was that you said that wasn't a good enough standard in the past. And I think we're going right back to that same place we were, where people get to pick and choose the winners. And when I say winners, people who get the contracts. So that's my concern. So I don't know how you could convince me otherwise. So I guess this is your opportunity.
make your informal question, but that was kind of a question. Go ahead, Ms. Somerville.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, without going through all of the past discussions that we've had on this, I don't know that Wamsack's position is that we want to tell everybody to do one thing in particular. This has to be it. We don't have any issues with having a conversation about how to make that work better for the smaller providers. If there's a conversation to be had there, our position is really, we want to make sure that there are standards and that we're going to support those. And I think the conversations we've had over the last couple of years have broadened that horizon a little bit and moved some things forward. So I would leave it there.
I guess I would ask a question, Ms. Somerville, at this point, and I know you probably haven't seen a copy of the amendment.
I haven't.
I'll bet Senator Cost has got a spare or Mike's got a spare. But my question to you, Ms. Somerville, is with this amendment, we'll give you time, of course, to look it over and you can come back and comment, but with this limiting the scope of this bill down to the court supervised treatments or the drug courts, narrowing the scope of the bill, if that would alleviate some of those concerns, both expressed by the senator and by yourself.
Mr. Chairman, looking at this really quickly, I believe that will alleviate that concern of catching the community mental health system up in this particular bill. It would just limit it to the drug court program.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the room which wishes to testify? And I would forewarn those online, if we have anybody online that wants to comment on Senate File 21, get your hands raised virtually and we'll get to you here shortly. Welcome, Labor and Health. Go ahead.
Our our association is not opposed to having standards. We're looking for reasonable standards. Most of our members are in private practice and they're a single operation. With the CARF and the heavy accreditations, we're not saying they're bad. We're saying that they're unreachable for most of us. It is an expensive process, even with some of the Department of Health funds. The number of people that would be able to take the time administratively to put together the manuals, the checklist, and then have the on-site surveys. If we're not seeing clients, we're not making money. So I have to make a decision. Do I spend 40 or however many hours necessary to achieve this accreditation? Or do I back off and not attempt to provide services for the drug court clients and get certified through the state? As Ms. Somerville stated, we have had a great opportunity in the last year to have sit-down conversations between the professional associations whose members provide the majority of services in the state. We think we're maybe making some forward movement in that aspect. The other challenge that we have, as the committee is well aware, we have such a lack of mental health and substance use disorder providers that if we're being regulated to death, we're going to continue to lose providers. So I think with the amendment, where we have options, that would be something that my association can stand behind and continue to have these conversations with the Department of Health and the other associations. And with that, I stand for questions.
Questions, committee. Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask about, are the professionals in this area, do they have to have some continuing education somehow to meet what's current standards and new areas in mental health? So yeah, if you'd answer that, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Senator Furphy, yes, it's a requirement of licensure for us to have continuing education requirements. off the top of my head. I don't remember what that number is. I think Mr. Searles from the licensing board could answer that. But we do, in fact. And if we are pursuing national accreditation as an individual provider, we also have to take a national test and have additional education and training to achieve those national accreditations as well.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Semino. I am with the Wyoming Counseling Association. Our biggest concern really comes down to reinventing the wheel. Do you want the enemy you know or the enemy we don't know? As of right now, we know what the accreditation process is through CARF. We do have individual members who are pursuing that and are getting reimbursed through the Department of Health. We did send out a blast to our membership and didn't get any negative feedback about the current accreditation process. Our concerns come from the fact that we don't know what that looks like when the Department of Health brings it in-house. Will it be more red tape? Will it be less red tape? Will it be different colors of red tape as far as which path you choose? So that really comes down to our main concern. We do stand for highest standards, whatever those standards are. I would like to clarify that there does seem to be some misinformation when it comes to the difference between accreditation and licensure. In the world of counseling, the American Counseling Association really defines what it takes to be licensed. Whereas if I was going to be accredited in trauma, specifically EMDR, it would be the EMDR Institute that would set those standards to be accredited in EMDR training. CARF is very similar. We have NADAC, which sets those standards for an ICRC for licensure, and then CARF, which sets the standards for the drug court. So I want to make sure that the committee knows that we are talking about two separate things when we are discussing the CARF accreditation. And I really just want to point out that what this does is it not only audits the clinical practice of these practitioners, it also audits the business practice of these practitioners that have these CARF accreditations to make sure that the drug court money is spent well and is spent efficiently, which I know is a value of this legislature. And finally, yes, drug court serves the most vulnerable. If the bill that is after this passes, that population involved in that bill, pregnant women, will also be served by drug court. And so we would like to advocate for those standards. We believe they're incentivized with those through the Department of Health. And I believe that's it. I stand for question.
Questions, committee? No questions. And I would just ask you one quick question. And again, I know you haven't seen that, you don't have the amendment in your hands,
No, sir.
but it almost feels like to the chairman that we're dealing with almost two different bills here. One bill, which is very broad, which you discussed, and then with the amendment, the bill narrows significantly down to the drug courts. And I think that was the bringer of the amendment's intention, rather than make this very broad to all the providers, it would narrow it down to the drug courts. And I think that's an important distinction. Of course, the amendment may or may not pass. If the amendment doesn't pass, then we're talking about the original presumption that everyone's spoken on. With the amendment, if it passes, that narrows it down to the drug courts. Do you have one preference one way or the other? I'm sorry to catch you on the fly. That's not very fair.
No, it's okay. This legislature is a fun improv game.
Fun. That's one word for it.
Fun. Yes. Mr. Chairman. Yes, I believe if I'm reading this correctly, it would limit it to the court supervised treatment programs, but I believe that would still include the individual providers. This is the way I'm reading that. Am I correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. If that is the case, then I think that my testimony still stands.
Okay. And what I would do is if this bill passes, amended or unamended, that anybody with concern about this get with the provider or the presenter of this bill and further distill it and then see what we need to do. Question, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is there any heartburn if this bill doesn't pass with you?
Go ahead, Ms. Sino.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, as of right now, no. We haven't had any negative feedback from our membership. Now, if this turns into an interim topic and it gets explored more, we would not have heartburn about that either. This is something that if this is a bigger issue than what we have been told from our membership, we are more than willing to have those conversations for whatever is best for the state, but also best for these vulnerable populations.
Thank you. Further questions, committee? Thank you very much. Anyone else in the room wish to testify on this bill? Going once, gone. Anybody online?
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 online. They've been admitted and they can turn on their video and mics.
Very good. I'm watching for them. I see a yellow hand. And I see a person. Either one of you, you can fight over it. Go ahead and introduce yourselves and present to the committee, please. Jump in.
Hi,
Go ahead and introduce yourself and
thank you, Chairman. My name is Shannon Vota. I'm the director of the Court Supervised Treatment Program in Park County.
go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this today. I am very much in favor of this amendment as has been proposed. We're one of the programs that it would affect, and I can kind of give a little bit of history about how CARF has affected our program specifically, and I know others in the state. I've been the director of our program since 2003, so I've been around before the CARF requirement and then since then. A little bit of history about how the drug courts operate. There's some of us that provide in-house treatment. There are some that contract our treatment out to other providers within the community. We were one of the programs that historically did in-house treatment, and we have now contracted out. So we've done it both ways. When the CARF requirement became a thing back in around 2002, I have to be honest, it was very onerous. It was a very difficult and expensive task. Prior to that, still, we all have to be certified. So the state of Wyoming certifies substance abuse treatment providers to provide intensive outpatient or outpatient treatment care, and that still stands. So right now, our program is both CARF accredited and certified by the state of Wyoming to provide those services. So the state standards still stand, whether you choose to do CARF accreditation or not. For us personally, CARF accreditation really seems to apply to large institutions. For example, West Park Behavioral Health has a treatment program. It's a large hospital. They choose to be accredited for all of their programs. When we took on CARF accreditation, and we are CARF accredited, that essentially translated to creating a lot of policies that we didn't normally have. It didn't change the scope of practice. It didn't change the services we provided or the quality of care we provided. Those standards were already in place, and we were already meeting those through the state. But by adding CARF, that created a new policy manual that's about that large that are specific to what CARF wants. And they address things like having a safety officer and risk management policies, policies that address if I were to step down or if our program were to close, who steps in and those types of things. But we're a small program, so I was wearing the role of all of those in our policies. So CARF really became a process of writing a new policy manual, and it didn't change our scope of practice. Another thing that we've noticed, for example, we've just started contracting out with a treatment provider. Their name is Open Space Counseling. They are licensed by the state of Wyoming to provide IOP care, outpatient care. And if this bill doesn't pass, they will have to become CARF accredited in order to provide services to us, which they probably won't do, which then limits who we can contract with. And for small communities like ours, by requiring that providers be CARF accredited, sometimes that gives you only one option in your community to choose, and you're forced to pay whatever the rate is that they give you, which can be, we couldn't afford. We did price out sending our services to a program like West Park, and we couldn't afford it. We would have had to shut our doors. So by choosing to use smaller programs that are more affordable, that gives treatment courts more options in our request for proposals when we're looking to contract out our treatment. So there's just kind of a little bit of history. There are 16 drug court programs in the state. And this amendment does have the support of those programs. I think what it does essentially is it allows us to provide the same level of care by licensed providers, but gives us the option to contract with maybe a smaller program within the state versus a large one. For those of us who do in-house treatment, it takes that CARF process off the table, which is lengthy, expensive. It costs us a little over $8,000 to do the CARF accreditation. And I know that funds are provided by the state, but I feel those funds could be turned around then to be used by the state to do their own in-house oversight, which they're already doing. Thank you.
Questions, committee? It looks like you're off the hooks. Thank you very much, Sharon, for that testimony. Thank you for coming to our committee today. And that leaves us with one person on the screen there. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, my name is Jeremiah Volk, and I am the Director Coordinator of the Natrona County Adult Drug Court. And first and foremost, I am in support of this bill. I made a few notes, and so I'm just going to kind of run through my list here. Even with the funding that's provided by the state to maintain CARF accreditation, it's not cost effective. The amount of time and effort that we put into the audits very much exceeds what the dollar amount is that the state pays for the auditor. And so the funding doesn't account for the amount of time. I have worked as the director of Natrona County for the last 3 years, but I've also worked there as a therapist too. So I can attest to both ends of that coin as well. And I guess I'm just kind of piggybacking on Shannon here, when the initial bill came up for drug courts to become accredited, my drug court, I was as a therapist at that time, and it almost seemed like client care became secondary, so that way we can make sure all of our T's were crossed and I's were dotted just for the CARF agent. And so that completely defeats the purpose. And I do need to add this, and Shannon mentioned it as well, but the state does have standards set aside for court supervised treatment programs. Following those standards is enough. It really is. What CARF does is come in and they say, well, now you have to make sure that you include this in your documentation and that in your documentation. And they're not necessarily looking at, well, de facto, they're looking at the standard of care, but they're more concerned about did they put their strengths, needs, abilities, and preferences in the right place in the document. I need to say this, and it was probably just a one-time thing, but our last accreditation audit was 3 years ago. We're up this year for another audit. Our auditor came in and he was far more concerned about seeing what Wyoming looked like. And so Wyoming paid $8,000 for this man to come in he got his job done, but he was far more ready to go to the Historic Trails Museum and see what the mountain looked like. So Wyoming gave him a paid vacation. Now that particular auditor won't ever be coming back because you never get the same auditor twice. But my point is we should keep the funds in Wyoming. It just makes more sense that way. Plus, people of Wyoming understand Wyoming. I'm not sure where our auditor was from, but it was somewhere in the Midwest. And so, what we were doing was just inviting this individual to come into our agency without really understanding the culture of Wyoming. And also the funding that we provided was going out of state. So just because it's CARF doesn't mean that it's a good audit. I also want to just mention that the Department of Health has talked about we're incentivized to have CARF accreditation because they pay for it. That doesn't seem like an incentive to me. It seems like almost as an apology, like we're sorry you have to do this, so we're going to pay for it. Whereas that money could be turned around and put right back into the communities so we could serve a greater number of our population, because the demand very much outweighs the supply right now. Plus, let's just say if the audit was $7,000 as opposed to $8,000, we would just have to turn around that money and give it right back to the state. So it's not an incentive at all. I think an apology is a better word for it. If we were a larger agency where we're providing psychiatric rehabilitation services and ongoing mental health beyond the term of the client in the drug court program, I could probably see needing a CARF accreditation, but I think the state standards that have been in place since before I was a therapist are just as effective, and they make the point very clear, and they make everything very concise. And treatment is, if you're state certified, you're getting good services. And really, that's what the purpose of CARF is. If you're CARF certified, you're supposed to know that, well, this place meets the bare bone standards. Well, our state certification does that already. And I think we demean our state by bringing CARF in. I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about this topic, and I tend to ramble. So I think I should probably stop and open up for questions.
I think your passion and your rambling certifies you for a position in the Senate.
Don't say that.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Questions, committee? No questions. I guess you don't get to ramble anymore. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No further online. Any further in the room who wish to testify? With that, we will close this to public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Bill's moved. We have a second. Moved by Senator Furphy. Second. I'll second it. Senator Koss, we welcome you to come up to a chair and work through the bill with the committee. Okay, committee, let's just work through this. We'll get to the amendment. Page 1, does anybody have anything on page 1 they wish to discuss? Page 2. Page 3. I believe that's where the amendment comes up. Would anybody like to offer the amendment? Senator Furphy, move, and second by Senator Hutchings on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? I think everybody got a copy of the amendment. Is that correct? And if it's my understanding that Senator Koss can correct me if I'm wrong or tell us that I believe what the amendment does totally is it just narrows the bill rather than being for all programs, just narrows it down to just the drug courts. Is that correct, Senator Cost?
Chairman Baldwin, yes, that is correct. The intent all along was never to have it any wider than the drug courts because they were the ones that brought this to me. So that was the intent of the amendment at this time.
And I view it as this makes the bill viable. Without this, I'm not sure the bill works as stands, but okay. Any questions or comments on the amendment committee? Senator Bouchard, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just want, I obviously vote on the amendment or vote yes on the amendment, but I'm still concerned this is all camel's nose under the tent and go in a different direction.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. That amendment passes. Continuing our work on the bill. Page 4. And I believe the director from Department of Health was correct in that this altered and maybe makes the fiscal note even a little bit more, a little bit less in funds. And of course, it's not determined exactly, so it's indeterminate, but obviously this lessens the impact. Any further discussion on the bill or comments before we vote on the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems like Senator Bouchard is really concerned about the bill. As I read it and understand it as it is now, I feel very comfortable with it, but he has history that if you would allow just briefly for him to go over the history, that would make him just maybe let us know again why he's so concerned about this bill.
Absolutely, Senator Bouchard. You want to
Thank
walk
you.
through concisely?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Hutchings. So what happens is when we start putting accreditations to such a high level and they become the standard and even so-called gold standard, I'm concerned that what we do is we don't look at all the other providers that have been giving service. I mean, every time we've come to the table on these issues, it's always been, just like the testimony we just heard, these are our friends, our neighbors, these are people that give treatment. But now we're going to go to a higher standard, and it's all based on money at some point. This is all because we have to go get some federal money, and now we're going to let them run the show. And as you just heard from the last speaker, it doesn't sound like he saw where the system is broken, where we need to do this. And now we even see where the people that come in and do the audits aren't really interested in what's going on here as much as we think they are. It's about the money. While the accreditation is different, it still comes into where in some states you have to have the accreditation to do the treatment, to even be licensed. You know, so as a facility becomes licensed to do both mental health and addiction services, in some states they have to have that accreditation. That's where I think this is going, where it's a one size fits all. Once the camel's nose is under the tent, that's the direction we move in. So that's my biggest concern. I don't think the system is broken right now, other than I think we need to do some more tweaks to allow more providers into our workforce, because that is the problem. We have such a shortage of providers in these areas, and now this also again makes it tougher, I think. So that's my concern.
Further comments, committee? Go ahead, Senator Hutchins.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, is there a way you think you can make or bring an amendment that would help push that camel's nose back, or you're just still going to be concerned?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hutchings, I think the best thing we could do is not rush this now and get it to interim topic. And that way that gives time for all the stakeholders to come to the table. And then we can probably maybe make a bill that will work and make sure that we don't have people that, we have unintended consequences when we do bills. I think that's what's coming. I think the interim topic is the best way. We've only heard from a very small amount of providers here today. What are we going to hear when something gets implemented? I mean, so again, I think good conceptual discussions today, but I'm certainly concerned about all the providers that we haven't heard from.
With that in mind, Senator Cost, means that the period is now open for interim topics if this bill does not succeed today. I think it needs to be suggested. Mental health is certainly could be one of our interim topics forever and amen. But I think this is one that's something we could look at, and I would suggest that it get put in. One of my concerns with the bill, and something that I heard several times in here, it always raises my red flags a little bit when I hear people perhaps are a little more concerned about the money than with the treatment. And I could be wrong. That could be wrong, but I heard that a couple times in testimony today. We're concerned with the cost. We're concerned with the money, and of course I did hear too that we're concerned with the patient care and with the care. But I want to make sure that that's balanced. So my thoughts are this does need more work, and it certainly raises to the level of being an interim topic. But that's my thoughts on the bill. Any further comments, committee? No. Let's go ahead and take the vote. Mike, go ahead.
For Senate File 21, Senator Bouchard.
No.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Hutchins. Senator McCune.
No.
Senator Baldwin.
No.
Senate File 21 has failed.
Thank you very much, Senator Cost. Please put that in as an interim topic. I'll be watching. Thank you. Okay. I suspect that many in the room are here to talk to us about the next bill, Senate File 89, Child Protection and Dangerous Drugs. Senator Hutchins, would you like to have a seat in front of us? And if there's anyone in the audience you wish to have up with you, feel free to grab them and bring them up in a chair next to you. And I would remind both the audience and the committee that this is a discussion. Make sure you go through the chairman and make sure that anything presented to the testifiers be informed and questioned. And with that,
That's okay.
Senator Hutchins, welcome. Oh, you're here all the time.
Sometimes early, sometimes late.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Tell us
Chairman.
what you got.
And I would like to apologize to you and the committee for coming in a little bit late today. Just had my times off. We're gonna bring before you today Child Protection Dangerous Drugs at Senate File 89. This bill was initiated on my end by a constituent, and Senator Steinmetz also had a few constituents come to her to want the bill to get drafted. And because we both had the same idea, we just combined some of her counties and another county's thoughts and my county's thoughts together. But this bill is dealing with the crimes and offenses of pretty much child abuse, providing a penalty, amending the requirements for mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse, and providing for an effective date. What we're doing is on page 1, 62503, the child abuse penalty, we're just adding to that, that a person is guilty of child abuse and a felony punishable by imprisonment for not more than 10 years if they intentionally, recklessly expose an unborn child to a controlled substance. We're finding that we are having a lot of meth abuse here in the state. And I think this is what is moving this bill. Let me see, we go down to number 3, where also if there is a measurable amount of controlled substance present in the child's umbilical cord, blood or tissue at birth. Let me see. Then we go over to page 3, 14.3.205, and we insert language that includes the definition of an unborn child as defined in 6.1.104 alpha. And that is basically it. Just amending already existing statutes, already existing penalties. In fact, the penalty on page 2 on line 1 is line 1 through 3 is actually less than the penalty that's already in our statutes on lines 20. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that. We'll sit for questions and hopefully we can answer them, since you have a little bit of background on the bill.
Very good. Questions, committee? Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been at the war on drugs for 50 years in this country. And some of you know, I did work with a pro-life group much of my time here when I lobbied for gun rights, believe it or not. This issue has come up before. And the problem and the consensus right now in our country is a lot of the pro-life groups have seen how women that would normally go get prenatal care and normally try to get help, even through a church, tend not to do that under these laws. These some of these laws were implemented in the 90s and in early 2000, and a lot of the pro-life groups in those states have actually turned on this concept, because when we take a woman who's, and not only maybe is pregnant, I mean, maybe she'll take the option of an abortion before getting treatment. So that's the concern in the pro-life world. So, and as we just talked about issues of, we have so many hurdles for treatment in our state. I think we're in a tussle here. So the problem that I have is I just know that if we go right to the felony, then we have a problem getting women into treatment. And so that's my concern. If we have to figure something out, and it seems like that would be another 2 pages of a bill to try to figure out how to get these women into treatment and not be afraid to tell anybody that, hey, you know, I mean, because it's a disease. It's not just once they get out, somebody does meth, they just can't break it. And there's so many other instances of in corrections, even I don't know if we've had the issue here, but you get a woman that's pregnant, incarcerated. I mean, they'll actually go to court and they've won in court to go get an abortion while they're in prison. So, I mean, so that's how we know this has happened. I mean, so I like what we're trying to do. I just don't know if it reaches that. So I hope you can understand where I'm coming from.
Is there a question in there somewhere?
I think the question is, it just lets her know so that way she can, hopefully there's some ideas that come out of here that she can respond back. I mean, I think there's a big question. How do we implement this and not drive those women underground?
Perfect. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bouchard, your concerns are ones that we have a list of. And the concern about how women will deal with the situation. One of the things we'd like, and it's not just to find a pregnant woman that's on drugs and let's just toss her into jail and just leave her there. You hear we have drug courts. But what we'd like to do is get that early intervention through the Department of Family Services and have them be notified when these women come in and are detected having drugs in their unborn child, and see what we can do to help them there, kind of like an early intervention. But when we're dealing with the mad life of someone who's on meth, you really can't predict what they're gonna do. And it's kind of unfair to predict that. But something has to be done. We can't allow these women to continue to be on unprescribed drugs and affect their children. And then the state has to take care of them for the rest of their lives. So we're with you on that, but we're also on the other side of the spectrum as well.
Follow up. Go ahead, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I didn't look at any lists that's in front of me. I can tell you I followed this issue in other states. And one of the most compelling pieces of testimony that I heard was a legislator in another state who adopted a child that had tested positive with meth. And they actually tussled with this same legislation in 2015 on this particular case. And what he said was that that child has been such a blessing in his life. And that if he could have just given the mother a hug and tried to get her treatment and not, and he actually talked about this possibility that she could have got an abortion had she had a penalty. So that's where I'm getting my inner feelings here, because I saw this testimony and it was heart-wrenching to hear this. I mean, so it really does, when we start using felonies, and it's not just in this case. I mean, look at what we've done in the war on drugs. We just haven't been successful by making punishment and incarcerating people the priority. That's because that's what's happened when you make a felony punishable by imprisonment is the number one thing on this bill. That becomes the highest stake there. And we don't have the vehicle to do the treatment when we put that up at the top. And I'm corrections, they tussle with this all the time, forget the pregnancies. They sometimes can't get people, and I think we've cut some spending on that treatment. I'd have to ask the director about that, but I mean, we just don't get enough treatment. So I don't know where this is going to go. And like I said, the testimony I heard was all based on this same subject or what I'm talking about.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Hutchins.
Senator Bouchard, my question would be, it seems to me that if a woman was incarcerated, it would give her time to be weaned off meth and hopefully change her life or lifestyle. But would you have an amendment that could be placed in the bill to possibly add some kind of treatment or reduce the time or make it a misdemeanor? What would be your desire?
Okay, just interrupt here for a minute. Rather than make this a go back and forth between the presenter and the committee.
Right.
Let's keep it to questions. And if
Okay.
there's an amendment, we'll bring that at the proper time.
Okay.
Okay, are there further questions that are questions committee? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at line 11 on page 2. At birth, there's a measurable amount of controlled substance, and we're going to test the umbilical cord, blood or tissue. Is that going to become a test for every birth or just when there's suspected foul play? And the reason I ask that question is it seems to me we're skirting the Fourth Amendment a little bit if we do it to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hutchins.
Senator McEwen, I don't know what the process is for women at birth. So you have
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee, for hearing this important bill today. And I'll try to I'll hit your question first. My experience with this bill is from my chief of police and my county attorney in Goshen County, because we've been dealing with this in cases from this extensively in Goshen County. And so they brought this to me and helped us draft this piece of legislation. I wish they were here today. I don't know that they're online. We probably should have contacted them and asked them to join us by Zoom. To your point, whether everyone would be tested, no, I don't think so. The reason is, from what their firsthand experience is, you can tell a meth baby, and the good doctor probably knows the answer to this as well, quickly upon birth, and then testing would occur to see if if this has actually occurred, that they were on a controlled substance when the baby was born. But it's my understanding, and I don't have firsthand experience like the good doctor here, that you can easily identify a child at birth that is addicted to drugs. And so secondly, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, I would like to just testify on the bill. And I am not as prepared as my good colleague who has been doing a wonderful job of answering your questions, because we've been working on the budget, which you will hear today. But this is an important piece of legislation, and I think we have to separate the two issues of, will the mother have an abortion, or are we going to deal with the baby after it's born? Because this is dealing with a baby after it is born. We're not talking about whether it will make a woman have an abortion or not, because when you're strung out on meth, I hardly think that you're reading statute 14, whatever this is, to find out whether you're committing. I mean, you're already committing a crime by using meth, right? And so I'm not sure that they're well-versed in our annals of the green books. So this is dealing with the child after birth. And the other issue that we were seeking to remedy is the fact that many times the child is like a ping pong ball. And so the mother is on drugs, seeks treatment, gets off for a certain period of time, and they seek to reunite the child with its mother. And she's back and forth, and it creates a very unstable environment for this child growing up as well, if the mother even keeps him. And it's very difficult on the people that are trying to step in and help raise the child. And the whole situation is really one that is, and I'm not saying that this is the perfect answer. It's a step we can take in the right direction. And it's something that the boots on the ground people are bringing to us. So when, our attorney and our chief of police, when they speak, I listen, because they deal with the ramifications of this, and they have insight that I don't have. And so that's my testimony, and I'm sticking to it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. And I guess I would just answer the one part of your question, Senator. And I can tell you what's in place now as to what would be in place after the bill. And that is, there's no testing done on that blood from the umbilical cord unless there's reason to suspect. And those reasons would include the child, a newborn infant, having signs of withdrawal from a drug. We keep talking about meth, but this bill brings into more than just meth. This is somebody taking somebody else's sedative. This is taking somebody else's oxycodone, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to be careful not to just put meth, although that's one we think of. That's the one that comes to my mind because I've seen a lot of these babies. But to answer your question is, right now, that test would not be done unless there is a reason. If the baby has respiratory distress, if the baby has signs of withdrawal, that's the reasons that it would be done at this point. So further questions for the presenters committee? Okay, stand by and let's see if there's anybody in the room. Departments, agencies wish to testify. Welcome to Labor and Health, first time this year. Go ahead and proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Corin Schmidt, and I'm the Director of the Department of Family Services. We appreciate the testimony this morning by the bringers of the bill because that gives us a little bit more context as to what the intent of the legislation is. I want to draw first your attention to the fiscal note that was presented, and I want to provide some clarification around this fiscal note now, considering what Senator Hutchings has provided. When we read this legislation originally, we were thinking it would be that the fiscal note was written around those cases that would potentially come to our attention and those children that would come into our care because of the Title VI changes. In other words, the criminalization of that use by a mom with an unborn child. So as you look through our fiscal note, you'll see that we think that we would need 4 additional caseworkers based on information that we were able to pull from our system. And again, this considers if every mom was charged with a felony and then perhaps incarceration. And the reason for those high costs is because in about half of the cases that we looked at, mom had other children. So we would be getting involved because of the neglect or potential abuse of the other children in the home, not necessarily just because of the unborn child. So as we start to talk about the family unit and not just the mom, then we start to reach through a little bit more through the system. We would also expect to see, because of taking those children into the home, at about a $4 million biennial budget increase in services. So that's to pay for services to those children, foster care, potentially services to mom, but certainly we did see a potential fiscal impact. However, what this doesn't include, though, is what Senator Hutchings had described, which is really wanting the Department of Family Services to be more involved. And if that is the case, the current draft bill does not incorporate child abuse as it's defined in the proposed Title VI into Title 14. So in the world of Title 14, that's called children, that's the statutes around children. It's within those statutes that directs a lot of the work of the Department of Family Services and also the work of the juvenile courts. So there's 3 different types of actions that can occur in Title 14. The one that's relevant here is the Child Protection Act, whereby if there's been a suspicion, and sometimes we know abuse and neglect of a child, the county attorney can file a petition in juvenile court, and then the judge makes some decisions about how that case will proceed. In regard to how a child comes into care, medical personnel and law enforcement are the only 2 who can take children into protective custody. The Department of Family Services cannot. So we may investigate and we may notify law enforcement or medical personnel, but ultimately they're going to make the decision. So when we start talking about babies and we start talking about babies born that maybe are going through withdrawal, it really is through the medical field and it's through law enforcement where those decisions are made. Sometimes we're involved in those decisions, sometimes we're not. But there will be an increased cost bringing more children in if there is some change, or if there are further changes to Title 14 to allow that to be a reason why a child might come into care. And then I'd like to provide some opportunity for Lindsay Schilling to discuss with you a little bit about what we're doing when we do have indication or notification of a child being born that maybe has been exposed.
Proceed. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. As the director mentioned, my name is Lindsay Schilling. I'm the Social Services Division Administrator for the Department of Family Services. I wanted to just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about some services and work that we already have underway targeted at this specific population. In 2016, there was an amendment to the Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act as a federal law that required any state agency that accepts this particular federal pot of money to develop and implement a comprehensive plan of safe care targeted for infants born and identified as being affected by substance use. So in 2017, there was a governor's assurance submitted and the agency worked through policy and procedure development to sort of come up with an implementation plan for this particular project. In 2019, DFS participated in an opioid use disorder, maternal outcomes, and neonatal abstinence syndrome initiative in partnership with the Department of Health and the University of Wyoming. This is where work sort of kicked off to address the topic of prenatal substance exposure. And then in 2020, we partnered with the Public Health Nursing Program to create memorandum of understanding that would provide funding from DFS to the public health nursing offices focused on developing plans of safe care with this particular population. And then COVID happened. So the public health nursing efforts were redirected. But in 2021, we did reinitiate work on this particular project and were accepted into an in-depth technical assistance program through the National Center for Substance Use and Child Welfare. It's a massive stakeholder group to include Department of Health, Public Health Nursing, Behavioral Health Division, and Medicaid, obviously DFS, the Governor's Office, early childhood services providers, including Head Start, the Perinatal Quality Collaborative Control, the Hospital Association, Children's Justice Project, Children's Trust Fund, and parents as teachers. DFS, under our recent award of the home visitation services grant called the McVie grant, actually have contracts ready to execute in May that would also provide resources and support to parents as teachers, home visitation programs to also look at preventative plans of safe care for these moms when they're identified. So generally, Chairman, the point, there's a wide variety of state level programs and community-based organizations already focused on building services and supports to help these mothers and babies. But that's through encouraging voluntary engagement and appropriate treatment services.
Thank you. Questions for the presenters committee? Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies, for coming in. I'm glad to finally get to see you, Lindsay. I know we've talked over the phone and via email. I appreciate your testimony, and I do have a few questions. Do you guys have numbers of women that are coming in with babies, or you guys are being asked to care for or deal with families with these issues where women have had a child that has some kind of substance addiction? Just a quick number. Is it hundreds? Is it couple? Is it 10?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Chairman Baldwin, Senator Hutchings, I did bring some information with us. In calendar year 2021, we had 113 open cases with 115 babies due to prenatal exposure. But given the way that we handle those cases, currently only 37 were placed in foster care.
Okay.
So less than half. The rest of those cases were supported through voluntary services and case management through DFS.
Great. Thank you. Continue, Mr.
Follow up.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, sir. Would you see this bill helping to reduce the need, giving people an awareness, especially mothers, because it seems like there's a misunderstanding that what the mother puts in her body is going to go into the baby. Do you find that may, or do you think that may be something that may happen if we were to pass this bill? Now women are aware, wow, I didn't realize that when I do this might happen. So they would reduce or maybe limit their actions.
Schmidt.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchings, to maybe reiterate a few of the sightings that Senator Bouchard offered, we are seeing other states take these types of laws off of their books because it really does discourage moms. What they're finding is it discourages moms for seeking treatment and even more so seeking prenatal care.
Gotcha.
So there is the potential that with the criminalization that mothers choose not to seek any prenatal care, which means then when those babies are born, We do see them anyway. And then sometimes because of the lack of prenatal care, we may see babies born with more than just health conditions related to the substance use. So there has been some documentation that shows that this type of law, the criminalization does not necessarily decrease awareness, but doesn't have the intended effect to decrease the numbers.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more question. It seems like darn if we do, darn if we don't. It's gonna happen. You'll see the children, the courts will see the mothers, and is that what you're pretty much saying? To put a question in there.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchings, yes, we are seeing the children, as Lindsay just
Yeah.
testified, with the numbers that we're already involved with. And so we do not know what kind of increase we would see as a result of the changes to Title VI, where this would make it a criminal action. That is the unknown for us. But we are already seeing
Gotcha.
those babies.
Thank you.
Very good. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think maybe we can run down on the process here, because I do know that when a child is born, comes into the district attorney's office, in our case here in this county, then the procedure is that the district attorney's office actually works to take temporary custody. And so I wonder if that's the area we need to work on to make sure there's a better way for all that to happen. So can you maybe, is that the way that it does happen? I mean, is there something we can do at that level to make that process work better, rather than go right to a felony conviction? So I'm just trying to grasp the whole process.
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, so protective custody in a sense of where medical personnel, when the baby is born, if they believe that the child has been abused or neglected or is at imminent risk of abuse or neglect, can take protective custody right then. Some hospitals choose to call law enforcement, and then law enforcement will make the decision. What you're talking about then is when, if a child has been taken into protective custody, whether that child stays in protective custody. And that's when the district attorney's office comes in and they make a decision about filing with the court a petition that says this child needs to stay in protective custody. So that's a question that I'm afraid I can't answer. That's getting into the area of prosecutorial discretion. And that's going to vary from county to county. However, it's a Title 14 action, not a Title 6 action, which then starts a pretty different conversation.
Follow up, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and I guess what I'm trying to figure out too is, let's say in this scenario, there's a child that's been taken into custody and we've confirmed that they have opioids or meth in their system. What's the process now? Is there enough on the books to actually prosecute the mother and possibly even, I mean, in some of these cases, I mean, we've seen where the women were, they used the drug as that was the vehicle to have them to have sex in the first place. I mean, if we find out there's a whole ring of this going on, is there laws on the books to actually go after everyone involved, even the mother as well? Or is there somewhere we need to work on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, and I apologize in advance to any of the attorneys and prosecutors in the room. I would think that would be a reference back to Title VI. So when we're talking about Title 14, it's about children, and we're talking about the Department of Family Services and the juvenile court and all of the actions that happen there. If there's a situation that lends law enforcement to believe there's more criminal action going, that it's not as a result, that the unborn child or the born child is the recipient of the crime, so to speak, that there's other crimes being committed, I would think that maybe there's statute there under the criminal codes to be able to intervene. But what this, my understanding of what this legislation does, it's really about the child. right? That's the indicator of what the crime is that a crime was committed upon a child. The crime is using substances. So in the Title 14, we would certainly wrap around that family, take care of that child, take care of that mom. If there were other criminal behaviors associated with it, the prosecutor would have to decide what to do about that.
Thank you. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted, can I have your name again?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Corin, Korin Schmidt, SCHMIDT.
Oh, great. I spelled it wrong, so I couldn't figure out what I had written down. I thank you for making that statement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because if you look at the bill, it doesn't say that a woman is found pregnant or once the child was born, we find that there are drugs in its system. So you are going straight to jail for 10 years. That's not what the drug is saying. The drug is saying that a person is guilty of child abuse, a felony punishable by imprisonment for not more than 10 years if, and there's a big if there, the person intentionally or recklessly exposes an unborn child to a controlled substance. The person does not possess a current and valid prescription for the controlled substance. At birth, there is a measurable amount of controlled substance present in the child's umbilical cord, blood, or tissues, and the exposure to the controlled substance causes bodily injury, disability, or disfigurement to the child. So we do have a limitation, or we do have limitations there. It's not just you've done this, you're going to jail. You have to fit into one of these categories. That's the way I see it. Do you see it as well, Ms. Corin?
Go ahead, Ms. Brent.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchings, the one thing that throws me off, to kind of answer the last question first, is on page 2, line 13, it says "and." So I think, and I would defer to the LSO certainly on this, but that to me indicates all 4 of those things have to be present. So yes, I understand that the felony child abuse would say if all 4 of these things were present, then the prosecutor could charge the mom under these statutes, and then it would go through a legal proceeding. And I'm sorry, I forgot what the first question was.
Thank you. Further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Further input from departments. Department of Health, as always, anxious to come to the soft seats. Those seats that you all are sitting in are very hard, and I acknowledge that. So come on up and testify. These are a lot softer, are they not?
Mr. Chairman, these seats are very comfortable.
Okay, go ahead and proceed.
Stephen Johansen with the Department of Health. I'll be very brief. Obviously, within the context of this bill, we don't have a role statutorily or legally here. But I would be remiss from the department's perspective if we didn't comment, picking up on Senator Bouchard's discussion earlier, that any punitive measures that create an incentive for individuals of high need to not seek treatment, or even the perception of that punitive measure to be part of that incentive not to seek treatment would be concerning for the Department of Health, both from the treatment on the mental health and substance abuse side that we fund or provide in our community mental health and substance abuse system, but also for our Medicaid members, which can fit into these categories as well, and are covered for their treatment under Medicaid. When we saw this bill filed, we did begin doing some initial analysis, both in those state systems and in our Medicaid population, to see what we could pull out factually in terms of members or clients that would meet some of these definitions. It's mostly the data we have is related to controlled substances versus a more broader range like alcohol or something like that. And we're happy to provide that to this committee or others should this advance. It doesn't really point you in a policy decision or a policy direction one way or the other, but potentially gives you some data on the numbers of Department of Health clients that might be subject to punitive measures like this. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions, committee? No questions. Thank you, Director. Any other departments or agencies? Jump on up. Departments or agencies. When you sit on the back row, you get more exercise when you have to come up here. Welcome to Labor and Health.
Mr. Chairman, Senator and committee members, my name is Dan Shannon. I'm Director for the Department of Corrections. And thank you for having me this morning. I just had a few comments regarding some of the questions that I believe was raised before the committee today. Department of Corrections, I never believe should have an opinion or try to provide as far as what the policymakers. We're on the receiving end of this. Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard's questioned a few things. Number one, would it increase treatment services? And it would be absolutely. I believe the second question was treatment services provided, or was the budget cut for this upcoming biennium? We lowered every department except for treatment. I took a stand, Senator Bouchard, that that's our last stronghold to help individuals. And the third question you raised is the possibility, is a person entitled to an abortion while they're incarcerated? And the courts are pretty clear, with no assistance to the state, they can't do that. So I hope that answers your question. Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchins raised a couple of questions, I believe. And I just wanted to comment. The Department of Corrections receives approximately 9 to 11 individuals on an average that are pregnant when they're incarcerated. Now, this bill clearly would define the child be born afterwards, so that wouldn't have an impact. Concerning the amount of percentage of crime, it's approximately 3% for child abuses or is incarcerated annually, the Department of Corrections. Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions.
Questions, committee. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shannon, thank you very much for your testimony. I did have a question. You mentioned about the abortions. If someone's in prison and they want to have an abortion, you said they cannot or they can?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchins, it's my understanding from the courts that they can, with no assistance to the state. They can, yes.
Can,
yes.
okay, thank you.
During my tenure, 15 years with the state, I'm not aware of any incidents, but we were challenged several times and the courts are pretty clear that with no assistance to the state.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shannon.
Thank you, Senator Hutchins.
Further questions? Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to know what treatment is involved in like what currently is available, how many beds for women? I mean, how would this impact that? If we had something like this where all of a sudden we have women that are incarcerated. So what are the treatment options now and how many beds? Anything else you can add?
Mr. Shannon.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, thank you for that question. We currently, as during the classification period, the individuals would be assessed and depending on their treatment needs. We have inpatient as well as outpatient. We presently have 56 beds available in our intensive treatment unit, but there's always been a waiting list. Currently, I submitted for funding to increase that because on an average, there's around 40 to 50 individuals always on the waiting from a 9 to 12 months program. With that being said, I was going to relocate those individuals and house them separately at our boot camp in Newcastle to try to catch up. So if there was an increase in incarceration, it certainly would affect that.
Okay. Further questions, committee? Thank you very much, Mr. Shannon.
Mr. Chairman, the chair is softer, but it's awful warm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can stay there if you want. Any other agencies or departments who wish to testify? Okay, moving from that, I see we have a representative here, Representative Kinner. Welcome to our committee. Would you like to offer any testimony? Are you learning? Okay, keep listening. Okay, further testimony in the room. Now I would forewarn, it's 9:12. We're going to close testimony at 9:40. So I know there's a lot of testimony. So if somebody else has said it, say it faster. Okay, so we can keep this moving because we are going to complete this bill today. Come on up. If there's more than one, we have 4 seats. They're all softer. Welcome to Labor and Health.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Dr. Hollis Hackman, I'm a psychologist and I represent the Wyoming Psychological Association. And I'll be brief. My association is opposed to this bill because this criminalizes a mental disorder, and we don't like to see that happen. We would rather see treatment be provided. People do respond to treatment in a favorable and positive sort of a way. The challenge is getting the treatment. We have limits in our state. There are not a lot of treatment options available. And I would just make a side comment that's sort of related, but in Montana, where they expanded Medicaid, they did a study on this recently, and 10,000 folks in that state that were previously ineligible for treatment were eligible for treatment and did receive treatment. So we see that as a positive. We'd rather see in however way the legislature can do this, and Wyoming can probably have a better plan, but we need to see treatment expanded and not see mental disorders criminalized. And for that, I would stand for any questions.
Questions, committee? Again, I would point out that we're going to hear about mental health for a long time in the future, for as long as any of us are on this committee, I suspect. Thank you very much, Doctor. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Andy Somerville, Executive Director for Wamsack. I want to just echo everything my colleague has said and jump to what I think might be some important information for the committee. As the committee may or may not remember, our community mental health centers are the only ones that have pregnant women substance use treatment beds in the state. We currently have 21 of them. Those beds, obviously there's not a lot, and there's a waiting list. Right now it's about 6 months to get into that program. And I want to clarify that those beds are, we call them parenting women. So they could be a woman that's pregnant or a woman that has children that come with her as well. We serve both of those categories with those beds. So the concern that we certainly have is, in general, to being in opposition of criminalizing addiction. The concern is if it works well and we are able to make contact with more women that need these services, where are we going to put them and how are we going to provide treatment to them? As you all know, it is not cheap to either build buildings or provide operational costs to get that treatment out there. So that is certainly a concern for us. The second concern that's kind of exclusive to the community mental health centers is the state receives a block grant from SAMHSA under substance use disorder. As part of that block grant, we, the community mental health centers, are required to serve a very specific set of priority populations. One of those populations that we're required to serve by SAMHSA is pregnant IV drug using women. It's very specific, as you can see. We have a huge question about what that would do. This bill would make us mandatory reporters as well. And so we're kind of at a crossroads as how we could meet the requirements of the SAMHSA grant and keep that grant money for the state, as well as follow the legislation. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm sure there's other testimony from other people, but I will stand for questions.
Questions from Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mrs. Somerville and Mr. Chairman. One of the things I'm hearing from yours and the previous testimony is, we want to treat people with addiction, treat people with a mental issue. But when we look at the bill, it's very specific on page 2 that this person is intentionally and recklessly exposing an unborn child to a controlled substance. Not just anybody that may be on a controlled substance and may be pregnant. We're talking about specific issues. And then once they're born, on line 15 through 17, they're causing bodily injury, disability, or disfigurement to the child. So we're not trying to criminalize even though it is a crime to use drugs that controlled drugs. It's a crime without a prescription. So I'm trying to understand where you're coming from when you say you don't want to criminalize an addiction. That's not what this bill is trying to do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchins, I would just add, I think maybe a better choice of words on my part than criminalize addiction. For us, obviously not being the DAs or working with this side of the law, I think we would just have concerns that it would people would not come seek treatment because they'd be afraid they'd be reported and then they wouldn't get that treatment. And we certainly, our stance is certainly we want to get treatment to everybody regardless of the severity of what they're dealing with.
Follow up, Senator Hutchins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mrs. Somerville. I totally agree with you. But if someone came in and they were abusing a substance and you saw that they were pregnant, would you not report it because it's the law or otherwise?
Ms. Somerville?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchings, so I want to be clear that I am not a licensed clinician. And so as the association director, what I would tell you is that I am unclear on that, and I would have to have one of my clinicians come answer that question. I do know, I mean, we greet these people at the door. If they come in for treatment, we're gonna treat them.
Okay, further questions, committee? Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Ms. Somerville. You guys want to arm wrestle? Who wants to be next? Or who speaks first? Jump in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Cheryl Foland, Wyoming Association of Addictions Professionals, and I am a licensed clinician. I'm an LCSW practicing in Rollins. Our association, as my prior two colleagues stated, we have severe and significant concerns and questions about the unintended consequences of this bill. First and foremost is that the lack of providers for treatment. The women that I do work with will look at this as a way to go underground, and they will be terrified. They will be terrified to see their doctor. They will be terrified to see a treatment provider, especially with the change in mandatory reporting. They are already conscious enough when they come to see me. At times, they don't even know they're pregnant. And if this becomes a bigger situation for them, then it's going to be even harder for us to reach out to treat these individuals. And we do have significant concerns about the discrimination of mental health, substance abuse, which is a disease. And we do not deal with other diseases in this aspect. We also have questions about the access to treatment. As you heard from Director Shannon and from Ms. Somerville, we have limited spots for treatment as it is. And obviously we would hope that there would be appropriations to meet the needs of our community people that we work with. Our recommendations, obviously, first and foremost, is treatment with a mandatory referral to a qualified addictions professional who can diagnose and then make referrals as needed as to placement. We obviously have data, and I believe others will be able to talk to the data, but we do have data that says that women that stay in the community, stay with their children, stay with their families, and have that support system in place do succeed. And recidivism rates are lower when they have those support systems in place. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Questions, committee? No questions. Thank you very much. Opposite end of the table. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Dole Izzo. I am with the National Association of Social Workers, the Wyoming chapter. And this is my first time testifying, so if I get the procedure wrong.
You're doing awesome.
So, Mr. Chairman, the Wyoming chapter of social workers is opposed to this legislation as it's written. I want to identify that social workers and other caring professionals are not losing sight of the children that are being put in harm's way. But what we are focusing on is our expertise in the treatment and what works and what does not work. Punishment to treat a mental illness and the disease of substance abuse does not work. If it worked, we wouldn't be sitting here. So that's one of the biggest stances of our reasoning why. I also have a couple of areas that I got a little confused on when y'all were going over the bill. On page 3, if my understanding is correct, this bill will add an additional identifier to when child abuse is occurring, and that is while a woman is pregnant. So I got a little confused about this only applies to after the child is born. So that piece of verbiage in this bill is game changing for the folks who engage in treatment. As Cheryl said, if we have people coming to us for treatment and they find out they're pregnant, does that mean we now have to report them? And that would stop that treatment? That is probably the worst thing to do to any person coming to get treatment. So that's a big concern of ours, is how does this apply to mandatory reporting? I also was struck by a conversation, it may have been on the previous bill, that Senator Bouchard said about unintentional consequences. And I think for this bill, unintentional consequences are huge. I think this is actually a paradigm shift that I would recommend warrants a interim time so that folks who with the Department of Family Services, people who provide treatment, can come in and provide that expertise. And one of the areas that I think as a clinician, so I've been a clinician for over 20 years. I have worked in hospitals, neonatal intensive care. I've worked at Cheyenne Regional, and sorry. It is not a clinically supported statement that if somebody is struggling with a severe drug addiction, that they are capable of making rational and intentional decisions regarding that illness. I don't think it's very often that somebody who is abusing methamphetamines or opioids are going to say, oh, I'm pregnant, so I shouldn't take this. That rationality, because of the definition of their disease, is gone. And we have to treat it as a disease. And that's that piece of the language as I was listening that I thought there was an element missing for the folks who do the work and have an understanding of where people are in that process. The other concern I have is, if I understand correctly, this bill also includes opioids. And Chairman Baldwin, you mentioned people using that without a prescription, but we know that people are using that with a prescription. So I think this is so big, and the language for me is very concerning, that I would oppose this legislation and would hope that this could be taken up as an interim topic.
Thank you. Questions, committee? No questions. Okay, let's move over here. You look a lot friendlier than Josh. So no, not that far. We're going to you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Baldwin and committee. My name is Erin McKinney, and I'm the Director for Women and Children's Services here at Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. I've been here at the hospital for 20 years, all on labor and delivery. So I'm very thankful to be there and have the experience that we all have together. I also serve as the co-chair for the Wyoming Perinatal Quality Collaborative. So what we want to talk about is the importance of prenatal care, which we have brushed on. And we know that women who are not, do not have the threat or worry about being penalized will more likely seek prenatal care. We know that prenatal care is a time when risk factors are identified. In my experience, I have seen mothers who have delivered babies, they've used substances during their pregnancy, and they've also sought treatment. And during that time, then the baby was going home with the mother. I've also had several opportunities where to see care where moms have been using substances, have not received prenatal care, and those babies at the end go into protective custody. The research does show that the care of and recovery for women who are using substances is stronger when they are pregnant because they have the motivation to seek addiction treatment. The social controversy surrounding how pregnant women with substance use disorders are viewed. I mean, there's a lot of topic about it as we are here today, but they suffer from a treatable mental illness, and this has created a barrier for the prenatal services. The best practice, which we do at Cheyenne Regional, are universal verbal screenings to all patients. And this is an opportunity for our moms. They don't often just say to their provider that that they might be using, but this screening helps us identify those that are at risk. And if a mom screens positive, it's the perfect time for the provider to work with the patient and set up the treatment plan and get them to the right resources. So this is why the importance of having the physician-patient relationship will help the mom in her treatment. And if our providers are required to report this, that is a huge barrier and puts both the mom and her pregnancy at risk. The gold standard, and I know that I've heard that question come up about treatment of opioid disorders for pregnant women, is MAT therapy, which is medication-assisted treatment. And we have seen that our moms that are on the therapy have better outcomes and are discharged home with their baby. Again, I talk about the trust of the physician and the patient, and the provider and the patient is essential for a healthy pregnancy and moving through meeting those patients wherever they're at in their addiction. As was talked about with the comprehensive in 2016 that Lindsay and Corin had brought up about the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, the CARA Act that went into effect in 2016, which requires states to develop and implement monitor systems for plans of safe care. The focus is a public health pathway, not a criminal pathway. There is progress. There's a lot of effort going on within the state to all work together. It's multidisciplinary stakeholders. I'm a part of that team representing the Perinatal Quality Collaborative as well as hospitals. We want to engage pregnant women in substance use disorders and treatments. Like I said before, the trust is important. We want best outcomes. All of us want the best outcomes for our moms and babies.
Questions, committee? And I probably don't say this often enough, but thank you for the healthcare you provide. I know Cheyenne Regional is within eyesight when I drive in every morning, and I'm thanking goodness I don't have to go to work. But that would go for all the mental health care providers as well as the health providers that appear before this committee. We really appreciate everything you do. We don't say that often enough, but thank you very much. And thank you very much for presenting. Okay, that would take us to Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Josh Hannas with the Wyoming Hospital Association. Aaron did a really great job, and a lot of people have said most of the things that I want to say, so I'll be very brief. One is, and Senator Bouchard brought this up, and a number of people have about laws like this dissuading women from seeking prenatal care. And in fact, their sense of that is correct, and it's borne out in the evidence. We know this to be true across the country in states that have similar legislation. I'd like to point out, and I believe Director Schmidt brought this up too, that in recent years, a number of states have changed their laws or written new laws to in fact protect women from prosecution when they're pregnant and have a substance abuse issue. Montana, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. Texas being the most interesting one to me in that their state public health department has invested in residential facilities where pregnant women can go to receive treatment for their substance abuse and prenatal care. And then once the babies are born, they can stay in those facilities and both receive treatment. Just wanted to point that out for the committee's edification, as it struck me as an interesting approach. I also would like to respond. I think I heard Senator Hutchings ask, I forget exactly how she phrased it, but essentially, is there nothing we can do, right? Are we darned if we do, darned if we don't? Is this going to continue to happen? And I think it asks a really interesting question in terms of what can we do to do better? And what does the evidence suggest would allow us to do better? And what I would offer to this committee and anybody willing to participate, that our hospitals are happy to engage in those discussions and talk about clinical best practice and things that work to improve outcomes for mothers and babies, and then even further upstream about, why do we have this substance abuse issue that's so prevalent in our state and in our country, frankly. So again, I don't want to repeat too much, but I would stand for questions.
Questions for Josh? No questions. Thank you very much, Josh. Go ahead, sir. With the best tie in the room, I might add.
Oh, thank you. Figured bringing children to the meeting was inappropriate, so I'd wear a tie.
My name is Dr. Jeff Story. I'm currently the CMO at CRMC. However, my pertinence doesn't end there. I've been an OBGYN in this committee for in this community for 25 years and personally witnessed members of the community with substance abuse problems, both from the side where I've been able to care for them over that time and throughout their pregnancies, and on arrival to labor and delivery when they have not been afforded the opportunity for ongoing care. My concern with this bill is that a criminalization of a addiction does exactly what the prior members have pointed out and drives people from care rather than to care. We all on this committee did not come in any effort to try and dissuade any individual from seeking care and improving the outcomes of pregnancy. I think all of us serve the same baseline purpose of trying to protect our children, both born and unborn. And I think this bill, unfortunately, is misguided in that direction. We have seen when I have patients come in with a substance abuse addiction, the ability to work with them in a collaborative nature and develop programs both as an OB and through the excellent assistance of all of the mental health counselors in the room and in our community, we have very much greater successful outcomes with a reduction in neonatal withdrawal syndrome in the hospital, where we see the what we call train wrecks really refers to those individuals who have not been afforded the opportunity to address that addiction through the course of their pregnancy. Further, criminalization of pregnant people violates several pillars of medicine, including patient autonomy, justice with the discrimination against women, beneficence, and non-malfeasance. And anything that interjects into the patient-physician relationship and harms the ability of physicians and other mental health professionals and substance abuse counselors that interferes with our ability to help our patients to the best of our ability, we would be strongly opposed with. And since I'm of the age that I can't do this without glasses, instead of criminalizing and creating felony penalties for someone who is within addiction, as Josh had spoken about previously, perhaps a level of providing clemency for those who both self-identify and are identified, who are willing to engage in appropriate treatment and going through maybe a better role than simply bringing out a large hammer. I do agree with Senator Bouchard in that at the end of the day, we're all serving to improve health and welfare of our children, and through a career in the business and very definitely boots on the ground. It works best when you can engage your patients and create a mutual beneficial outcome for those patients rather than an antagonistic approach such as would be seen with a felony based. And with that, I'll end my comments and stand for any questions.
Questions for Dr. Story. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, have you read the bill?
I have read the bill, ma'am.
Okay. On page 2, it's very, very clear. This bill is not about creating a felony to those who are substance abusers or addicted to substances. Just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Chairman Baldwin, Senator Hutchins, the initial portion of your bill directly states that it's a felony account with punishable up to 10 years in prison for those convicted of substance abuse with a non-prescribed controlled substance, which could result in bodily injury, permanent disability, or disfigurement at birth. So in fact, it is a felony and criminalization of the process as this bill is written in my reading of your bill. Thank you.
I disagree, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Let's go to Sheila. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Sheila Bush with the Wyoming Medical Society. Truly everything that I was going to bring and say has been said better than I could have said it. I just will offer formally the Medical Society and our board and the physicians across the state and PAs that we represent strongly oppose this bill. Any bill that interferes with the physician-patient relationship creates a lot of confusion on some of the legal side of this, which has already just previously been discussed. There's not consensus of what this actually does, especially with reporting and when the crime is adjudicated. And so with that, I would stand for questions, but truly it's all been said.
Questions for Ms. Bush? No questions. Josh, Travis, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Travis McNiven, here on behalf of the Northern Arapaho Business Council. The Tribal Council and members are certainly very understanding and agreement with the bringer of the bill to protect, with the goal of protecting women and babies and the importance of life. That is obviously very important in Native culture. With that said, they also have concerns with the bill that it may disproportionately affect Native women. There are, as you know, within the reservation, Native women need to leave the reservation to go to the hospitals in Lander and Riverton, where they would, of course, be subject to this law. This could potentially punish Native women for engaging in activities that are actually legal on the reservation and make them less likely to seek parental care and lead women to putting themselves at risk through unnecessary at-home birth. One of the things that I would point out is that the marijuana, which I know meth has been spoke about a lot, of course, today, but the bill does, have all controlled substances. Marijuana has been decriminalized by the tribal governments, and so there is that concern there. There's also a potential, if the committee was to move this bill forward, would certainly like to address potentially a religious exemption for peyote, as that is used in religious and cultural ceremonies as well. And then, as has been spoken about by others, I will not proceed with some of maybe the unintended consequences of the law as currently written and the perceived nature of what may happen to dissuade women from going and getting the prenatal and care in which they may need, and the council also would of course continue to advocate for additional treatment services, feeling that this bill may be a little bit more stick than carrot. And with that, I would stand for questions and again thank the bringer of the bill for the intention.
Questions, committee? No questions. Thank you, Travis. Lindsay?
Mr. Chairman, fastest testimony in the history of this committee. The Wyoming Counseling Association echoes all of the concerns that have already been discussed. Any bill that possibly weaponizes the therapeutic relationship, we obviously have concerns. And we are also very concerned about the unintended consequences, though we appreciate the reasoning behind the bringer of this bill. And I stand for questions. And I did that in under 20
Questions for
seconds.
Lindsay? No questions. Okay, at this point, we're 1 minute past when I said we were going to close testimony. I'm betting there's some people online that want to testify. The first ones I would like to ask for, and we'll go for a few more minutes, is those who are in support of the bill online. If you would raise your hands, or if there's anyone here in the audience that's in support, go ahead and come forward. No. You can run. You got a couple minutes.
Mr. Chairman, if they raise their hand in support of the bill online, they can turn on their video. They've been already admitted.
They've been admitted, okay. And we're watching the screen closely, and I see a face. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute and speak to us. I recognize that face.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is Jonathan Lang. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm from Evanston, Wyoming. I have not heard any testimony yet about how this is a deeply constitutional issue. And although I'm a pastor, I'm primarily interested in this issue because of my journalistic work and my investigation of a case in Torrington. So there is, of course, a huge chasm between criminalizing addiction and criminalizing a behavior engaged in while addicted. And the reason we criminalize any behavior is protect people. So like when we criminalize meth in the presence of child in the living room, we're not criminalizing addiction, but addressing child endangerment. And to address drug exposure in the womb is to treat children equally under law. And that's the real issue here. Current Wyoming statute doesn't uphold the Wyoming Constitution. Our Constitution clearly states that, quote, all members of the human race are equal under law. But our statutes don't actually get this done. And just to briefly restate what I sent all of you by email this morning, in March of 2020, a Wyoming judge, a newly minted Wyoming prosecutor, and a defense attorney all agreed that there are holes in Wyoming statute that do not make clear that unborn children should be treated equally under Wyoming law, and that's unjust. So if we don't think we should treat them equally under law, we need to introduce a constitutional amendment to Article 1, Section 2. But if we want to uphold the oath of office and protect and defend the Constitution, we need to correct and clarify statute to make it consistent with the Constitution. And I think that's what Senate File 89 does well. Thank you for letting me speak. Stand for questions.
Questions, committee. Thank you very much, Pastor Lang. It's good to see you this morning.
Good to see you.
Hold down the fort in Southwest Wyoming, if you would, please. Are there anyone else online who wishes to testify pro or con?
Mr. Chairman, we do have a couple more. They can turn on their videos.
And I would ask these that testify to keep it short so we can get this bill worked and get it voted on this morning. So Senator Pappas, who's in the crowd watching diligently, he'll be on Wednesday. I don't see anyone yet.
Mr. Chairman, we have a Katie and a Rochelle Bond as well online. They can turn on
Okay.
their video.
I see the first face showing up online. Go ahead and unmute, ma'am, and go ahead and speak to us.
Hi, is it all right if I start?
Go ahead, ma'am. Introduce yourself and go ahead and speak.
Hi, this is my first time testifying, so I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chairman and Senators. My name is Rochelle Bond. I am a family physician here in Wyoming. That means that I also deliver babies. I take care of prenatal women in the prenatal period. I take care of men and women for just regular family doc kind of things. And I see a lot of the before and a lot of the after effects of things that maybe lead people to using substances. I'm also an MAT provider. That's the medication assistant treatment. I think people are most familiar with Suboxone. I also am on a maternal morbidity review committee where we look at maternal deaths within 1 year of being pregnant. And also I'm part of a Wyoming steering committee looking at plans of safe care. I personally, I'm not representing anyone, but I personally oppose this bill because of a lot of what's already been said, which is that we really want to bring these women and families into the light so that they can receive the care with supportive relationships. I am also confused by the bill a little bit where it says, I don't have it right in front of me, but I have read it, the reckless use. I'm not sure who would be defining that and who would have the discretion of what is considered to be reckless. And so I have concerns there. And just overall, I think that the physician-patient relationship would really be harmed by this. And the intent, I think, is good, that we want children to be safe. We want families to be healthy, but the impact is very different than the intent. I think the impact, as has been said before, would be detrimental to that cause and would not provide justice for our patients and families here in Wyoming. And I would take any questions at this time. Thank you.
Questions, committee. Thank you very much for presenting, and you did a very good job for your first time. Thank you very much. I believe there's one more. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we actually have two more now. So we have
Okay, we can take both. We can take both as long as they're brief, and we're going to be closing the public committee. I believe, is that Rochelle? I can't tell. We can't read the name very well from here. But
Mr.
go
Chairman.
ahead, speak and we'll know it's you. Go ahead and introduce yourself and speak to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kristen Schwartz, and I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, speaking on behalf of survivors and our member programs, which are the local domestic violence and sexual assault programs in each county of Wyoming. Echoing a lot of what's been said, and feeling that it would disproportionately affect, this bill would disproportionately affect victims of domestic violence and sexual assault who have higher vulnerability to homelessness, substance abuse, and poverty compared to the general population of women who are not abused. But I think it's really important to state that the change in mandatory reporting would affect domestic violence and sexual assault advocates and offer them less protection than they have right now in Wyoming Statute 1-12-116. And again, this serves as a deterrent where pregnant women don't go in to seek services, for the violent situations that they find themselves in. It affects not only them, the unborn child, but also children in the home. And we feel it's important to encourage people to talk. It's important to encourage people to understand that they have people to talk to that are not going to require them to leave or report to the system, and get this help necessary, get the help that they really need. And at this point, I thank you and open up for any questions.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Kristen, for your presentation. And that should leave us with one more person, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, they've been asked to turn on their video and unmute themselves. I'm not sure if they're having issues.
Okay. Apparently we have some issues with the video. Let's go ahead and close testimony. Committee, would you be in agreement with that? We'll close the public testimony. I think we've heard a lot, as I expected that we would. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill? Bill moved. Second? Second by Senator McEwen. Okay, committee, let's talk about the bill. It's a short bill. I don't think we can say page by page, but are there any suggested amendments? Senator Hutchins?
I don't know if Senator Furphy may have one, but it appears that I get where everybody's coming from. I understand it, but I think they're really misunderstanding page 2. That's the big issue. And if there are some amendments they can offer, we can go back to the people who brought this bill to us and say, hey, these are some of the concerns that these organizations are having. But as written, I still like the way it's written. The bill I had would have had less words in it, but attorneys and lawyers and DAs got together to create this bill. And we've been in contact with them, and I'm looking over their data. And like I said, I like the way it's written, but I am open to suggestions to make it better.
Further comments? Discussion, committee? I would just offer my own comments here.
Yeah.
Chairman can do that. And I would say that I've received an avalanche of testimony on this online, much more than what we've heard here today. I've certainly got a lot of, and I'm a sponsor of a bill on the other side, very similar in nature to this one. And I would say up front that maybe I've been persuaded by the testimony. A lot of my testimony is coming from my constituents at home, et cetera. And here's my take on it. I think the intent is good. And as a medical care provider, I will tell you that I've been present as the 2 doctors who testified. It's heartbreaking to be present at these births, sometimes very angering. And I've experienced both. I experienced both a lot. That being said, I'm not sure that this bill gets us where we need to be. And I kick myself every time I say this, but I think it's something that needs discussed in the interim, perhaps more in depth. And I say that by the end of this session, we're going to have 20 topics on the interim, right? So obviously we don't select them all, but I think it's something that's worthy of study. I think we need to find a solution. I think we need to get mental health care for these patients. Absolutely. Opioid abuse came up. I happen to sit on national opioid abuse, and you've all heard that before. This is something that we're going to discuss. Actually, the last week of session over here, I'm going to that meeting. But that's just my take. And go ahead, Senator Furby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm very supportive of unborn children and born children. I would like to protect them as much as we can. I'm just concerned this bill has some unintended consequences. And Mr. Chairman, I agree. We probably need to have an interim topic and discuss this in more detail. But that's the reason I'm going to vote no on this bill at this time. I really respect the presenter of this bill. Her intent is great, and I would like, if we can come up with something to take care of those children long term. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further comments, committee? Yeah, go ahead. I thought your finger was poised above there. Go ahead.
I know Senator McEwen, thank you, Mr. Chairman, adds his comments, but I appreciate your comments and your willingness to work with me or work with the citizens of Wyoming, because this is a big issue. So thank you.
Yeah. Senator McEwen.
Mr. Chairman, I almost want to go hide in a coat closet right now. I see the pros and cons of both arguments. It is a very, very sad issue. And I too am more than willing to work on this if we take it to an interim topic. I think we're close, but I'm not sure we're all the way home. And I think we could cause a lot of problems with or without it. So it's a tough issue. Like I said, if I could get away with it and convince somebody I'm in my first trimester because of my gut, I'd declare a conflict.
I think that was your breakfast you're sensing.
But, and I do appreciate the work Senator Hutchings has put in on this. And she's gone way further than I have with it. And that's pretty much my comments so far.
Thank you. I think you reflect.
Thank you, Mr.
You reflect what everyone here at this table is feeling. I didn't have breakfast. Okay, with that said, I would say to Senator Hutchings, if this bill does not go through today, I would ask that when you do this and certainly put it in for an interim study. But I want you to make sure that included when we talk about it is those attorneys, the prosecutors. I think that's something important we missed today and we didn't hear from any of them. I think that would be an important stakeholder here. Anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and take a roll, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, Committee Senate File 89, Senator Bouchard.
He left a proxy. He voted no.
Senator Furphy.
No.
Senator Hutchins. Senator McEwen.
No.
Chairman Baldwin.
No.
Senate File 89, 4 no, 1 aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. We will move that other bill, Senator Paps's bill, to first thing on Wednesday. With that said, thank you, committee. Thank you, Senator Hutchins. That was very good work. And we appreciate everybody's testimony.